Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started in a minute or two. We're going to give another minute or so for attendees to arrive. All right, let's get started. I want to welcome everyone to the post-primary VAC hearing of 2025, hosted by the Campaign Finance Board and NYC Votes. We're excited for the opportunity to hear from the public on their experience voting in the New York City primary election this year. I'm Paul Seamus Ryan, Executive Director of the Campaign Finance Board. I'm a 50-something white male with short brown hair and a short beard and glasses, wearing a white dress shirt and a brown sport coat this evening. And I have a yellow NYC Votes background behind me. Before we get started, I want to invite anyone who plans to give testimony on this call to raise their virtual hands on Zoom now and keep them raised until testimony is over. If you're not able to use the raise hand feature, you can just drop a note of your intention to speak in the Q&A, and we will promote you to a panelist in the order we see your hand or message in the Q&A. I'd like to start with a note on what the VAC is for some folks who might be joining our meetings for the first time, or a reminder for folks who've joined before. The Voter Assistant Advisory Committee, the VAC for short, advises our city agency, the Campaign Finance Board, on its voter engagement efforts and recommends changes to improve New York City elections. The committee, when fully constituted, consists of 9 members appointed by different members of city government. When appointing members of the VAC, city lawmakers consider their experience with groups or categories of residents that are underrepresented among those who vote, and community, voter registration, civil rights, and disabled groups. With that, I'd also like to welcome members of the VAC and ask them to introduce themselves. Maybe we'll start with you, Chris.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. Good evening, everyone. I am Christopher Malone. I am a middle-aged white male with graying hair, brown and gray hair. I'm wearing a white button-up shirt with a blurred background, coming to you from Queens, New York. I have been on the VAC for 5 years. I was appointed by former Mayor Bill de Blasio in April of 2020. I am by profession a political scientist. I am the associate provost at Farmingdale State College out on Long Island, part of the SUNY system. And I love every minute of being on the VAC. I love all of our public hearings, and I especially enjoy the public hearings where we get to hear from the public about their experiences in voting. So I'm looking forward to this evening, and thank you, Paul, for the opportunity to address the public here. Thanks.
Thank you. Danielle, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Paul. My name's Danielle Gerard. I am a little old white lady with glasses and the coolest dress I could find in my house today, and have been on the VAC since 2013 when Controller Scott Stringer appointed me and Controller Brad Lander asked me to stay on. I love the VAC because of the incredible amount of work that is done by a very small staff that is extremely professional, well written, and is just a tremendous service to the public. And so, like Christopher, I'm also really glad to be able to hear from the public at an open meeting like this one. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome, Danielle and Chris. We have another VAC member representative, Sarah Marr, who's having some audio difficulties, I think. So he may be back with us in a minute. And if so, I will invite him to introduce himself. So with no further ado, let's turn to the main event of the evening. Tonight's hearing will be centered around the voter experience in the 2025 New York City primary election. As everyone on this call, I'm sure, is aware, the New York City primary election, in the New York City primary election this June, New Yorkers used ranked choice voting to vote on the citywide offices of mayor, comptroller, and public advocate, as well as the districted offices of borough president and city council. Overall, voter turnout in this election was impressive. The city also saw a large increase in early voting. According to a new analysis of turnout data, more than double the number of New Yorkers cast ballots during the 9 days of early voting compared to the last primary for citywide offices 4 years ago, including a substantial number of first-time voters. A total of 385,184 New Yorkers voted early in this primary election, compared to 191,197 in 2021. With that, I want to recognize the tremendous amount of work and effort by our friends at the Board of Elections to make it possible for New Yorkers across the city to vote in the election. And I want to extend a huge thank you to poll workers across the city who worked tirelessly throughout the early voting period and on election day, navigating new challenges and questions and allowing New Yorkers to have access to our democratic system. As I mentioned, tonight we're using this time to hear from the public on their experiences as voters in this election. We're anticipating both spoken testimony from attendees on this call and planning to share out a few of the many written responses we received before the hearing through email and our social media platforms. We're excited to hear from both. We'll start off with hearing from folks on the call. I would like to introduce the members of the CFB staff who are here tonight to respond to spoken testimony and to read out some of these written responses. I want to welcome Tim Hunter, the press secretary for the Campaign Finance Board, and Olivia Brady, our youth programs manager. And since Olivia is on tonight, I want to give a quick preview of the VAC youth hearing coming up on August 13th, which will be run by our cohort of youth ambassadors, which is a program Olivia manages. We're very excited for that coming up next month. Olivia, Tim, welcome you to introduce yourselves, give a physical description of yourselves, and then we'll jump into testimony.
I'll jump in here. Sorry, Olivia. My name is Tim Hunter. I use he, him, his pronouns. I am a black male, 26 years old, and I'm wearing a brown collared shirt and these amazing headphones that sometimes pick up the conversations around me. So my apologies if that happens. And I will kick it over to Olivia.
Hi, everyone. Paul, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I definitely hope to see folks at the August 13th VAC hearing. My name is Olivia Brady. I use she and they pronouns. I'm a white woman. I'm in my late 20s. I have big, round, brown glasses. I have brown curly hair, and I'm wearing a cheetah print top with a black sweater. I'm very excited to be here this evening.
Thank you and welcome, Tim and Olivia. We gave attendees some prompts for their testimony, just to spur some direction in what they might remark on. So I'll share those with you. The prompts we suggested for public testimony are: were you able to find the information you needed to engage and vote in the 2025 elections? Were you able to easily locate your poll site? Did your poll site change? Did you experience any accessibility related issues while voting? Did you vote in person on election day, during early voting, or by mail ballot? And how was your overall voting experience? Your testimony doesn't need to just rely on these prompts. As a reminder, anyone who wants to speak should raise their virtual hands on Zoom and keep them raised until their testimony is over. If you're not able to use the raise hand feature, you can note your intention to speak in the Q&A. With speakers will be prompted or will be promoted to panelist one by one to give their testimony. So please accept the alert on your screen to join as a panelist when it pops up. And we'll start with our first speaker. I'm looking for a name. Dana Waters is our first speaker. Welcome, Dana.
Hi there. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Dana. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a white woman with red hair and a black top. So I have been a New York City voter since 2012. I've also been a poll worker since 2016. And for the last year, I've been an affidavit inspector at one of Manhattan's busiest early voting sites. So I want to talk a little bit about what I heard from voters and kind of convey some of what came up. First off, great job to NYC Votes and the CFB for all of their hard work, making sure everyone understands ranked choice voting. That said, one of the biggest problems we saw is people did not understand that New York City, or New York State rather, requires party change for voter registration in February, as opposed to the voter registration deadline. This is not well publicized. As a poll worker, I didn't know this for quite a while. We had a lot of confusion. We had a lot of disillusionment, upset, some yelling. And we also had a lot of poll workers who were not giving out correct information. Folks were being told that if they voted by affidavit, it would count if they updated their party registration on the day that they voted. That's not correct. And there's going to be a lot of very disappointed voters getting notes from the Board of Elections saying that their ballot didn't count, and that could discourage them in the future. So I would love to see NYC Votes put out as much information as possible well in advance of that deadline for any primary. I know you all do a great job of getting information out there about ranked choice voting, so I have full faith that similar efforts could be made and succeed when it comes to the party change deadline. I also would really love it if some better information could be given to voters about their rights. So if they're not coming up on the poll pad, or if their information in the system is incorrect, they have sometimes been told, and this happened to a friend of mine who called me in a panic on election day, that they cannot vote, rather than the fact that they should immediately be offered an affidavit ballot. If someone believes that they should be allowed to vote in that site by federal law, they should be offered a provisional or affidavit ballot. I don't know why poll workers are not necessarily aware of this information. I think part of the problem is that a lot of what we're told is policy, as opposed to the fact that this is in fact a law and they have to give that out. People are not being referred to the poll site coordinator to talk this through when they're confused. Letting voters know their rights and that they can always cast a provisional ballot, whether or not it counts, is a different issue. But I wound up sending my friend back to a site and she was able to vote, and I'm quite confident it will be counted. And the last thing I would love to see more information about is what to do in case of emergency. So if you're displaced from your home by a natural disaster, by a fire, because there's bed bugs, if you can't get to your poll site because you're sick or have to go away suddenly, or on the day of the election and you were planning to vote day of, you come down with COVID, what do you do? Who can go to the Board of Elections for you? How can you cast a ballot? These are things that came up between the voters I talked to, the voters I tried to reassure and sometimes were yelled at by, which I understand their frustration, and my friends, many of whom are first-time New York City or New York State voters. A lot of them just didn't know this. So once again, I really appreciate the chance to speak to this. I love my job as a poll worker. I love being able to help the voters, and I'm very appreciative of what NYC Votes does. Yeah, so that's all I have to say. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Dana, both for your service as a poll worker to the public, as well as for these questions and your testimony. Tim, Olivia, anyone have any thoughts to share in response? Danielle, Chris?
Yeah, I'll chime in and just say, New York City Votes, we're doing everything that we can to make sure voters are aware of like important deadlines, especially as it relates to the party enrollment deadline. We know New York State, we know there are close primaries here. So, we're going to continue to do that. And just wanted to, add one little side note that if voters are wondering what their rights are, nycvotes.org does have a page where we list out rights that voters have. So if you ever are in need or hope or you have friends that are interested in that, definitely take a look at our website, nycvotes.org, to figure out your rights, the rights that you have as a voter. It's a very extensive list. Thank you so much for flagging that, Dana.
Danielle, do you have something to share?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that I thought that all of the points that Dana raised were really quite valid. And I wanted to add that the only name on the back of the ballot was Alvin Bragg for DA. And having that position on the back of the ballot, I mean, we spent a lot of time reminding people to turn the ballot over, turn the ballot over. And I'm not sure that filtered down, but I thought that was problematic.
Thanks, Danielle, and thank you again, Dana. We will certainly take your testimony into consideration when we're putting together our plans for public education for the upcoming general election and for future city elections. So thanks so much. Our next speaker is Michael Ring to provide some testimony. Welcome, Michael.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for letting me testify here. First, my name is Michael Ring. I'm a 62-year-old white guy wearing eyeglasses, and I need a shave, wearing a green t-shirt. That's about it for me. I'm Vice President of Disabled in Action. I'm a voter with a mobility disability. Also was a poll worker working early voting at Brooklyn Borough Hall, and I was a coordinator at my local school. And I wasn't planning on bringing this up, but I'd really like to echo what Dana just said. I have no scientific count, but a lot of people could not vote because they didn't really understand that they had to be registered in a party. New voters to New York or new voters. And it was a little tense sometimes. They were angry. We had lines. They waited online an hour and a half sometimes and couldn't get to vote. And in the beginning, we were confused as to what to do, and they were filling out affidavit ballots also, which was a waste of time, but it was what happened. But what I wanted to talk about was the ballot marking device. As I testified before, we don't know if it's broken until someone uses it. So as the coordinator, if things aren't too crazy, I try to be the first person to vote. And I did that at my local poll site at 6 o'clock in the morning. And what I saw on the screen was to be polite, was bananas. The way the ranked choice voting was presented on the screen on the ballot marking device, I don't know why people weren't going crazy during early voting. The first question was, who is your first choice for mayor? And it listed your possible choices. And then your next question, which took up the whole screen, is, who is your first choice for a controller? Then it listed all the choices. Then it went back. Third question, who's your second choice for mayor? And it listed all the candidates, including the one you already picked. And that went back and forth until the mayor and the controller's race was exhausted. And then it bounced back and forth between the borough president and the city council, all the ranked choice voters. It was extremely confusing. After I voted, I called the accessibility office and I thought everything was broken. And I found out this was a feature. This is something that the Board of Elections kind of expected. I was told, this isn't going to happen again for 4 years, and we're looking at upgrading the system. So I'm really hoping the Campaign Finance Board can put some sort of pressure on the Board of Elections to adjust the way the ballot is presented on the screen to the people with disabilities who are voting. It should look just like a ballot. You should be able to click on little boxes like you would with your pen. And then you could finish voting for your candidate, and then the next race, one race at a time. But it was mushy brown banana show. I'm surprised it didn't make the media because there were a lot of confused voters. And in early voting, people just accepted it. They just said, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, because I was an inspector. I wasn't at the BMDs. But hopefully by the next ranked choice voting opportunity, we'll have new software. And thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for sharing this experience, Michael.
Sure.
Tim, Olivia, Chris, Danielle, anyone have anything you'd like to say in response?
That's nuts to be able to keep all of that in your head going back and forth, Michael, is quite difficult. 100% on the software. As it relates to the unregistered voters in line, how do you prevent that? Obviously, not all non-voters or voters, registered voters, I should say, are going to be fully informed. Is there a way, if there is a line at a voting site, a polling site, for someone to, provide information while people are standing in line, a poll worker, so that people who are not registered can be told that their vote won't count, or they're standing in line,
Well, I was just
for
an
no
inspector.
reason?
I'm just handing out
Yeah,
ballots. This is
right. No,
up to the
yeah,
Board of Elections to create new job roles. The line
yeah,
management people could have been talking to people, but not, then you scare people and they're not trained in who gets a ballot.
yeah.
They're just trained in, stay in line. Here's the door.
Yeah, no, I'm not suggesting that we create a new jobs program like that, but I think it's what NYC Votes does and the Campaign Finance Board does on the voter education side, to do everything that they can to, inform the public about the rules of voter registration deadlines. That's all I
Yeah,
think we can do. And, it's not going to be 100% perfect. But the software that you're talking about, that there's an easy fix to that. There has to be. That's, that's clear. So thank you for that. Really appreciate it.
sure.
Um, This is Olivia speaking. Michael, I just want to thank you so much for raising this really important issue. It was something that I wasn't aware of in regards to the ballot marking device. And I wanted to let you know that on my team, the Partnerships and Outreach team, we have one senior coordinator that specifically works on education and outreach to voters with disability. And I would be happy to connect you with that staff member if you're interested in getting more information or getting involved that way.
That would be great.
Perfect, thank you. I guess to the VAC and the event coordinators, let me know how we should go about making that connection afterwards.
Cool.
Thanks, Olivia. And I want to recognize that both Michael and Dana mentioned party registration difficulties. And though the Campaign Finance Board and VAC have not taken a formal position on the following policy, I did want to lift up that the Charter Revision Commission is taking a close look at some possible reforms that would go before voters for approval or disapproval, that would open up the primary process from the current closed system where you must be registered, not only must be registered with a party in order to vote in the primary, but also be making changes to that registration well in advance of the election, which was Dana's point. So I want the public, voters, everyone in attendance tonight to keep an eye on that issue as it develops for the Charter Revision Commission. So before we take any more verbal testimony, we wanted to share some of the written responses we received through our call for testimony via email. So we're going to shift. We're going to show some slides here on the screen that share a little bit of that written testimony. We asked voters to share their voting experience in the June primary via email at NYC Votes. The actual address was nycvotes@nyccfb.info. And after soliciting feedback from audiences across our digital platforms, NYC Votes got over 400 responses. So we want to share some of the highlights tonight. We got both positive and constructively critical feedback, more negative feedback. We're going to start with some positive. One sort of summary of the positive feedback is that voters shared that they like voting by mail, voting early, and ranked choice voting. When sharing about voting in person, they said their experiences were easy, fast, and poll workers were friendly and/or helpful.
So I'll take point on reading this next one. So Mark Wallum reached out about the mail-in ballots and said, loved getting my absentee ballot by mail and taking time to look it over, consider my choices, and then voting in the security of my home. I just dropped it in the mail, safe, easy, and secure. Please keep no excuse needed absentee by mail balloting. I love it. We love it too, Mark. Thank you. Catherine, this line, I'm sorry if I mispronounced the last name, reached out about the voter guide, the voting guide, the voter guide with all of the candidates, info on ranked choice voting, and a place to write down choices for each office was so helpful. There was a good summary of key points on the candidates. Not only did I carry it into the polls as a reminder, I saw lots of other voters doing the same, and so did I when I went to go vote. So thank you so much for sharing that, Catherine.
I will also share some positive feedback we got first from David Wynyard. RCV is wonderful and a great improvement in making elections more democratic. And from Jenny Palmer, we heard, I love ranked choice voting. We saw how that played out in this election with certain candidates aligning and co-endorsing each other, which was an effective strategy in blocking the presumed frontrunner. So always good to hear that voters are benefiting from some changes that have been made to the election system.
We're going to finish this segment with two more pieces of positive feedback we've received in writing, and then we'll welcome some more folks in this meeting to present verbal testimony. So Susan Werby commented, I moved from Boston, Massachusetts, a Boston, Massachusetts suburb in 2023 and have been so very impressed not only with pre-voting information, but also with the overall voting experience. Voting in NYC couldn't be easier. And Michael Epstein wrote, I'm disabled, so the mail-in ballots are essential for me. The paper info guide was indispensable. We really love hearing this positive feedback. It tells us what we should keep doing, that we're doing well and we need to keep doing or even increase. And with that, I'm going to welcome any other verbal testimony. Anyone else in the meeting queued up to testify? I apologize if I mispronounce your name, but Netsa Morgan? Netsa? And please do correct me if I've mispronounced your name. Nachesa?
Here we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you so much. Welcome.
Thank you. I'd like to just stay off camera.
Sure.
I was a poll worker this past June, and it was my second time doing it. My first time was in November. And first, I want to say that the training for being a poll worker is very overwhelming. It was really rushed and it was so much information. I almost walked out because I was like, there's no way. I was just like, God bless poll workers. I don't know how they do it and keep our democracy together, but I can't. There's no way that I can be a poll worker after 3 hours of all of these protocols. And thankfully, one of the teachers, calmed down. Was like, don't worry, you'll be okay. And so, and I ended up being okay. So I was stationed as somebody to help the ballots go into the machines. And so that's what I was assigned to for both times. I'm in East Harlem on 106th Street where there was no AC in June. It was challenging, but we got through it. What I'd like to say is on the second ballot, there were these delegates and pretty much like nobody voted on the second ballot because nobody knows who they are. And when they asked me who they were, I was like, I don't know who they are either. And it's been a problem for me every time I vote because there's all of these names on there that I don't know who they are. And then I happened to just be in a different location and I ran into a woman named Tamika Mapp, and she was doing something. She's a club leader, and she was getting the counts for how many people, from the poll workers sitting at the table. She was like getting counts from them. I don't know exactly what she was doing, but when I heard her name, I was like, oh my gosh, I think I voted for you. Don't know who you are. I just checked your name. And so then I stayed in touch with her. And then I learned about this there's group A, group B, group C, group D. There's these clubs. There's this whole world that we don't know about, and it's so frustrating to not have information on who these candidates are. Also, the last time there was ranked choice voting, there's some sort of democratic position that's unpaid, and I saw the guy outside the poll station, so I talked to him, and then I ended up voting for him. But I was like, where is there information on you? There was nothing online. And so I'm like, I'm voting for these people. I don't know who they are. I don't know how to get information on them. I don't know how this process works. And there's no place to really find out. And so it's just really, really frustrating. Thankfully, Tamika Map has been like answering all of these questions. And I ended up on her Zoom meeting last night where they were interviewing judges. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so important. We really need to know what these clubs are doing, because these judges were like selling themselves so that the club members would vote for them. And I'm like, what? I have no idea what this is. So is there please any way you can have just information available for those of us who want to know? And also, when people are telling me I don't know who these people are at the poll station, I can at least direct them to a place where they can get the information themselves, instead of saying, I don't know either. I just voted for the women, which was the truth. Lastly, I would like to say, I don't know why there wasn't a ranked choice card available for the day of voting, because I know there was a ranked choice instructions card available for early voting. And that's the end of my rant. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Olivia, Tim, Chris, Danielle, anyone have any thoughts to share?
I can chime in a bit here. Thank you so much for sharing. I believe that as it relates to the length of the ballot, that can vary depending on where you live and who's running to represent your neighborhood. I know it can be very confusing seeing positions, judgeships, judicial delegates, all these roles that are sometimes kind of just like crammed through. And you look at our voter guide and we tell you they're on the ballot, but sometimes it's hard for us to even try to reach out to some of these people to get information on them to kind of put in there. And if we did, I'm sure our voter guide would be like 200 pages long, and it's kind of hard for us to get that out there. But just want to say we definitely hear you on that. We always agree that there could be more information given out to voters about who's running to represent them. Our website is still what I think the best resource available for New Yorkers to take a look at. It tells you exactly what's going to be on the ballot. If you want to look at a sample ballot before you head in, so you can do your own research. A lot of people don't know that you can go to the Board of Elections website, take a look at your own sample ballot, what you're going to see at the poll site before you even get there. So I totally recommend taking advantage of that as well in the future. And thank you for your service as a poll worker. I know it was hard getting through that training, but thank you for doing it.
Thanks, Tim. Danielle, what would you like to add?
Yeah, thank you for your service, Anachesa. That's really important to do that. And thanks for sticking with it for a second year in a row. I just want to say that a lot of the time, the smaller districts, it sounds like you spoke to what's called a district leader. And, there are lots of different, so that's one thing. And sometimes they don't have any competition, so they don't have to run. And sometimes they do, so they do have to run. It is a low level party position, but it's also the position that has a lot to do with organizing the green sheets that we all have to sign to get candidates on the ballot. So they do a lot of the, for lack of a better phrase, a lot of the really low level work. But without them, a lot of elections wouldn't function. So I'm glad that it sounds like you actually got to talk to someone, which is really important. The other thing is about judges is that there are different ways of electing judges, and the Supreme Court said that, there are many different ways for judges to become judges. And there have been times when it's been tried to get rid of elections for them, but the Supreme Court has held that electing judges is a fine way to proceed. And sometimes it can be the most democratic way rather than having people in a smoke-filled room pick them. So I'm sorry that the that information was not readily available to you. But I think what Tim just described is really the best way to find out, is to get a sample ballot and then look up some of the information, which is actually on our website. So anyway, I commiserate and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Danielle. Chris?
Get off of mute. Likewise, thank you for your service. Look, it is a confusing thing out there with finding information. I'll speak a little bit about the political clubs since you brought it up. There is a jungle of political clubs in New York City, and most of them are organized around either neighborhoods, regions, or issues. I think if you want to, learn a little bit more, what I would suggest is City and State, which is a local, online newspaper. They usually do top lists of things, Power 100 list, top most influential people. I recall that they do a list of the political clubs in New York City, the Northwest Bronx Democratic Club, this club. And you could really get your head around the political clubs of New York City, or you could ask a district leader in your neighborhood about these clubs. And usually they're founded by an elected official or a district leader. And it's really kind of an entree into elected office in the neighborhood. So I would, as they say, Google it, but City and State usually lists the political clubs of New York City if you'd like to learn more about them in the city. So just some advice there.
Thank you, Chris and Danielle and Tim, and thank you, Nachesa, for your testimony. We really appreciate it. Our next speaker to offer testimony is Anna Humphrey. Anna, welcome.
Hello, thank you. My name is Anna Humphrey. I'm the Transportation and Voting Community Organizer from the Center for Independence of the Disabled, New York, or Sydney. And just for a quick visual description of myself, I'm a white woman in my 20s with curly blonde hair, and I have the Sydney logo behind me as my background. So thanks for the opportunity to speak today about the experiences of our consumers during the primary election. So Sydney conducts both poll site accessibility surveying for every election, as well as a post-vote survey where New York voters can highlight their experiences with voting in the election. So I did submit a longer written testimony, but I'm just going to go over some of the responses from the post-vote survey now, just so I'm not taking up too much time, but some of the main things that we've found. Firstly, I'll just emphasize that many voters praise poll workers for their kindness and their helpfulness. But our survey did uncover some gaps that could be a threat to voter confidence and future participation. So it's been mentioned many times during this hearing, but many people reported a lack of voter information. So people specifically in our survey reported not knowing what was the last day that they could vote at the end of early voting, uncertainty about when they were eligible or not to vote in primaries because of the confusion with having to re-register with a party, and then confusion about mail-in ballot procedures. Many voters also reported having permanent absentee status, but they just stopped receiving the ballots automatically and were forced to reapply, although they were on the permanent status. And then I also received a report of a mail-in ballot being returned as undeliverable. And then when the person did call the Board of Elections, they were just left on hold for hours until they gave up. And then some other complaints were sites lacking air conditioning, staff being untrained in operating the ballot marking devices, and not knowing how to set up the headphones specifically. And then again, like Michael and maybe some others mentioned, that the ranked choice voting, however the software was set up on the BMD, was illogical and confusing and bounced between offices and rankings with no real intuitive order. So based on these experiences, we would suggests investment in a more modernized ballot marking device that's better compatible with ranked choice voting, expanding outreach in voter education to underserved communities, ensuring that the permanent absentee application is actually permanent, and then requiring multiple functional ballot marking devices at every polling location that can be tested throughout the day to make sure that there's backups for outages, and then enforcing accessibility training for all poll workers that includes disability etiquette. So thank you so much for your commitment to improving elections and for allowing me to speak. And if you have any questions, or once you read my written testimony, if you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to provide the data that we collected. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. And I should have included in my introductory remarks, many of you may know, but some of you may not be aware that the Board of Elections is a separate city agency from the Campaign Finance Board. The Board of Elections has control, they administer the election themselves, they organize the poll workers, etc. We will certainly communicate everything we hear this evening that relates to how elections are administered and suggested improvements and complaints to the Board of Elections. I wish we had more power to change those administrative procedures directly, but we do have some power, at least some voice, to communicate concerns and suggestions to the BOE. So we'll be sure to do that. And I think many of your great suggestions and reflections relate directly to how the election was administered, the equipment that's used, etc. So we'll communicate all of this to the Board of Elections. So thank you for providing. I'm going to welcome any of my colleagues, Olivia, Tim, Chris, Danielle, to provide a response. Olivia.
Yeah, I can also chime in here. Just from the voter engagement and education perspective, the Partnerships and Outreach team is on the ground working with voters from communities all over the city. And I really want to thank you for your feedback. This is really valuable insight. And I think something that our team can do is train both impacted voters and voters who don't necessarily need to use the ballot marking device on how to actually use that equipment, so that voters can all better advocate both for themselves and for others. So again, thank you for sharing that perspective and insight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia. Any other thoughts before we move on to our next speaker? All right, thanks so much, Anna. Our next speaker to provide testimony is Kathleen Collins. Welcome, Kathleen.
Sorry to keep you waiting 1 second. Hi, my name is Kathleen Collins. I'm a congenital quadruple amputee, Caucasian woman in her 60s with brownish short hair, brown eyes, wearing purple headphones and a sleeveless pink top. And I've voted in New York City since the age of 18. I agree with all the testimony that's been provided here today from Ms. Waters. I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name, Ms. Waters, Mr. Ring, Ms. Humphrey, and others. They all brought up really good points here, especially about the confusion with who's able to vote on primary day. And I really think we need to work on that, because even I get confused when I'm trying to give advice about that. Because you talk about the golden day where people can first register. And I believe when you first register, you can pick a political party, but other people can't do it on that golden day, the first day of early voting. So we need to make that clear to people. And also that it is February 14th is the last day right now that you can pick a party to be a participant in the primaries. As you may be aware, we've been discussing for a few years now the fact that the ballot marking devices are on their last legs. And this fact was made even more self-evident during ranked choice voting, since the present ballot marking devices are not set up for ranked choice voting, which came into existence after these ballot marking devices were purchased. Some examples of the ballot marking devices not working are set forth in the written testimony submitted this morning by 12 disability organizations in New York City, which it includes my experience where I was not able to vote using the ballot marking device. I had to use a pen and paper, which is, was disturbing. We understand that on primary day, the polling site at Sellis Manor which is located at 135 West 23rd Street, where a large group of people with disabilities vote, experienced problems with respect to at least 3 ballot marking devices breaking down during the day. These experiences were not included in our written testimony that the 12 organizations submitted this morning because we're still gathering information regarding what happened at Sullis Manor. And we will bring you up to date when we find out more information. We recommend that any ballot marking devices purchased in the future be better able to handle ranked choice voting. For instance, the software, as Michael pointed out, for future ballot marking devices needs to be such that it's easier for the voters to keep track of their votes for each office, and the summary page needs to be organized in a way that voters will be able to easily review their selection on the ballot. I know I was having a really hard time with that. Further, the future ballot marking devices need to be able to handle multiple ballots so that people with disabilities and without disabilities in New York City will be able to vote county-wide, like voters we understand can do so outside New York City. Unlike the past when everyone voted on the same machines, which were not accessible to all, which was discrimination and thus bad, we changed to a system that allows people with disabilities to vote independently and privately, which is great. However, the system we presently use is not perfect because it separates and segregates voters with disabilities and without disabilities who choose to use the ballot marking device. And this results in problems I see with these machines because there's not a large community of people using them, so they don't get put together correctly, the poll workers don't get proper training, and so forth. So we really need a better system. I don't understand why we cannot create a voting machine that is accessible to and used by all voters so that voters with disabilities are no longer separated and segregated from their neighbors. If everyone voted the same way as in the past, but with an accessible machine, I'm sure the machines would be kept operational, otherwise the public would be screaming loud and clear. Since people with disabilities are the largest and a truly intersectional minority, our voices must not only be heard, but our recommendations need to be adopted. And we put in the organizations put in a group of recommendations in their letter that we'd like you to please look at and think about. And it's time that we also need to stand up against misinformation and disinformation that's happening around voting, especially the attack on the rights of people with disabilities to vote privately and independently as part of their community, and not as a separate and segregated manner. Also, I would just like to request that all members of the Campaign Finance Board use one of these methods, and that maybe you have 9 members on your board. How about 2 members use an absentee ballot, 2 use an early mail-in ballot, somebody does early voting, another person on the election day or primary day, and that those who are voting on primary day or early voting use the ballot marking device to read or listen to their ballot and to mark it, because then you would understand the issues and our experiences of what's happening with us. Because, I mean, the way it was totally set up this time with the ranked choice voting, I love ranked choice voting, but it's totally super difficult to do it on a ballot marking device and to see if you did it correctly on the device. So thank you for listening to me today. And if we can help you in any way, please reach out to us. And the Campaign Finance Board people are doing a great job. And the people at the Board of Elections, they do a great job. We need some impetus to get things moving to a better system. So thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony, Kathleen. I really appreciate and love your suggestion that those of us who are working at the agency, working in elections, that we do intentionally engage with elections through every method so that we can experience it firsthand and experience the problems firsthand, and maybe motivate us or at least better inform our own approach to reforming and improving systems, processes. I really appreciate that suggestion.
I get my spouse to vote on the ballot marking device, and I'm trying to move. We want to get even the candidates. Maybe you could help with that, getting the candidates to all use the ballot marking device as part of their voting experience.
Yeah, I really appreciate that suggestion. Danielle, Chris, Olivia, Tim, anyone have any further thoughts to provide in response?
just thank you, because you often appear before us to testify, and you really provide tremendous insights and great ideas. And thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And one of our ideas that we really like to push for in the next 4 years is to make it so that I see that people that have children, they can use some of their campaign funds for childcare. In the handbook, it talks about that. I think it's at page 29 or so. And that we have that be also applicable to people with disabilities, be able to use some of their funds to put them on a level playing field when they are campaigning. Thank you
so much, Kathleen. All right, we'll turn to our next speaker, Rosal Ortiz-Thompson. I want to welcome you. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, good evening. Thank you. I'd like to start with my description. I am a 65-year-old Latina woman with black hair. I am wearing some red framed glasses with a red necklace, beaded necklace, and a striped blue and white collared shirt. I'd like to, first of all, thank the Campaign Finance Board, particularly this VAC committee, for all the work that you do and giving us this opportunity to come forth and share our experiences with you. So I want to begin by echoing some of our previous speakers, Dana, Michael, and Kathleen, with all of the issues that they've brought forth. I've been working with the Board of Elections since 2016 in various capacities. I started as a poll watcher, then I became a poll worker. I've just about operated every position and capacity with the exception of a coordinator. So I think I'm a little experienced with some of these very important issues that have been raised. I've seen them, I've experienced them, and I have a unique contribution because I as well have been candidate on some of these ballots for the volunteer, and I stress voluntary lower level party positions such as the county committee member, judicial delegate, and district leader. So Dana's issues are, I agree with completely all that has been said. I echo with Michael and the BMDs that the BMDs, and to Kathleen's point as well, they're on their last leg. The accessories, has been my experience that unless a voter comes and wants to use it, you don't know whether they work or not. I don't know how frequently all the accessories are tested prior to delivering them to the sites. And I'm not sure if on either early voting or on election day, there's someone dedicated to test them out. I can only speak for the sites that I've participated in and worked at, but they are a problem and there needs to be an upgrade. That's maybe something that a petition can go forth to the governor and open up the purse strings and possibly present these other groups and associations where these BMDs are necessary to be used, can help encourage to upgrade these machines. In terms of my experience on election day, there were several poll workers who we're disturbed by the amount of dogs that come in. I raised this at the last VAC meeting. And I'm not sure if there's a group chat for dog owners, but when they are challenged, we as poll workers can only make a statement that pets are not allowed. If the response of the dog owners is that they are a service dog, we cannot challenge them. They're not required to show us documentation. However, it's become an issue as time goes on. I'm noticing more and more dogs come to the site. The owners bring them. Some of them are small enough where they can be in carriers. But some of the things I've experienced is the dogs jumping on the tables, startling the poll workers. One dog breed may start barking at the other, and it becomes a disturbance within the site. Myself, I've manned the line to direct where to go for the check-in, and a dog startled me by licking my hand. And it's just starting to become, for lack of a better word, a bit of a nuisance. So I was hoping that perhaps on the guide that the CFC puts out, that Vote New York City guide, that there can be a page dedicated to the do's and the don'ts of poll sites. The things that are not permissible in terms of no pets, also drinks, no drinks, no food, no photography. As I mentioned, as I man the line and I have to keep an eye out for these situations, as well as, the electioneering items. Voters are very passionate and very voiceful when I explain that these things are not allowed at the poll sites. I mean, it's almost, they come at me very belligerently, and, it, as has been stated, we have long hours. We try to be very courteous, and we sort of take some abuse from voters on these issues. These matters should not be so extreme. They're pretty simple, the do's and don'ts, but voters want what they want. And when you explain that it's not permissible and you even point to the signs, their attitudes, and it's not a pleasant experience. So I'll leave it at that. And another situation, as was stated, on the, I think it was Kathleen, or the voter whose name I'm not sure how it was pronounced, but in June, the weather is hot. We know our seasons are getting more extreme. And there are sites that do not have the capacity to have air cooling systems. And even those who do have it, it's a shoot or miss whether it's working or whether there's a faulty line somewhere. And so that's another item that perhaps the governor can open up the purse strings and invest in possible portable water fountains. At the very least, because I haven't experienced it personally, but I've seen where the poll worker has passed out either from heat exhaustion, or I don't think that it was a stroke, but as a voter on election day, when I went to my site that was supposed to be air conditioned and was not, there was one fan directed at the police officer, and that's 16 hours plus that the poll workers had to endure. And there was no water delivered where, from my understanding, the Board of Election was supposed to provide. So that, that's another area to think about. In June, we need to do better by the poll workers so that they can continue to effectively and professionally serve the thousands of voters that come through the site. Also, and these are probably directed more so for the Board of Elections, but if you can indicate them on as suggestions onto your reports. There are numbers for early voting. There are numbers that are displayed over the printers for the ballots, and this is for early voting only. And if those can be enlarged, because as I'm directing voters, they don't see the numbers. If I tell them, oh, you can go over to table number 5 or 3, they don't see the numbers. And sometimes it's just too hectic for me to go through an explanation. So either if they can just get another set to display on the table, aside from the printers, or make those signs above the printers larger, I think that would help, and it would speed up the confusion for the voter as to what table to go to, or that they're being directed to. And lastly, a couple of voters, it wasn't a lot, but there were, and maybe a handful of voters were inquiring as to the ranked choice voting and the distribution of the votes once if their first choice was not selected, how it's dropped off, and then how those votes from the drop-offs are distributed amongst the others. And when I looked at the voter guide, it wasn't, I myself was a little confused. It wasn't clear enough for me to understand with the graphs that were displayed how the distribution among the remaining candidates received the first choice that was not the top. So I don't know if maybe there could be a video dedicated to that. But I think that would be a little bit more helpful as well. And lastly, for the woman who wanted more information about the judicial delegates and the clubs and so forth, that the particular area, the neighborhood that she spoke about in East Harlem, there is an event that's coming up dedicated to judicial delegate teaching that explains the process on the judges and what they do and the panels that they have to attend to get the nominations to get onto the ballot. So Tamika, I forget her last name. She mentioned her. I believe she is the female district leader, but the male district leader, William Smith, is hosting that. And if she reaches out, if she's listening, if she can reach out to Tamika and get that information, it's coming up on July 15th. And that would be, I think, very helpful and clear up some of her questions. And in terms of the lower level party positions and information on who they are and what they do. One resource would be the Manhattan County Democrats. If she can reach out to their office and They have a monthly meeting with the district leaders that she can request to be invited to, and she can get more information and get more educated. So I'll end with that. And again, thank you. Thank you for
Thank
the
you.
opportunity.
Thank you so much for your testimony, Bracel, and for joining us this evening. Would any of my colleagues like to respond to any of Bracel's suggestions or comments? I will note that when I went to early vote in person with my wife, she commented specifically, she was very fearful of dogs, and she commented on the number of dogs that were in our early voting location, and her surprise and her skepticism that they were all service animals. But so you're not the only one who's noticed that, and maybe enough thinking it. Well, thank you again for joining us this evening and for your testimony, which we will take into consideration, including your do's and don'ts addition to the voter guide. We'll definitely discuss whether that's feasible for us. Thank you. We're going to continue now with more of our written responses we received via email and over the social media platform Reddit, this time describing challenges in the voting experience. And I'm going to start with the first slide on this topic, the challenges, and provide you with an overview of some of the feedback we've received, which is voters had issues with poll sites, lack of information on candidates, the effectiveness of ranked choice voting, mail-in ballots, and registration deadlines. That's a general overview, and some of my colleagues are going to chime in and read some of the specific comments we received. Olivia, I believe you're up.
My apologies. Thank you. So we have two pieces of feedback. First from Nicole Saucedo. I remember at one time we had voter cards that they scanned and we were in and out. Whatever happened to that? They were great. Bring them back. Arlene Schutz also says, one problem I've encountered with early voting is the poll site is too far from where I live. I prefer voting early. Several elections, I had to wait until election day because of the location of the early voting poll site.
I'll chime in for these ones here, but I do want to flag they still have the Fast Pass. You can even download it on your phone if you want to get that, in case anyone was wondering. So this next one is from Deborah. The snafu on voter guides, including Eric Adams and other subsequently canceled races, was incredibly unfortunate. It leads to distrust. I do want to just take a quick second and acknowledge that it's our priority at the Campaign Finance Board and NYC Votes, to provide trustworthy information to New Yorkers and empower them to make their voices heard at the ballot box. We take voter education very seriously, and we do apologize for any confusion that the mistake with the voter guide caused. We did try to rectify it as quickly as possible, and we sent out, mailers to every registered New Yorker that was going to be voting in that primary with an updated list of mayoral candidates, and we appreciate the public's patience with us while we fix that. The next comment is from Sarah Molinaro about mail-in ballots. I had requested a mail ballot. The online tracker said it was sent, but it never arrived at my home. On voting day, I went to vote in person and I was marked as already having voted and had to vote by affidavit. This was a frustrating experience. We were very sorry with that experience, but we are happy that Sarah made their way to the poll site.
Thank you, Tim and Olivia. Mary Hawkins wrote, "We desperately needed someone who could interpret Bangladeshi. This is the second election where we've relied on someone who is a child of immigrants instead of having an interpreter. We also did not have any Hindi information and could have also used an interpreter for Nepali folks too. Nepali uses Devanagari, so the names would have been easier to read for folks who read Nepali. Our polling place had Mandarin and Korean ballots, but nothing for South Asia. I live in Jackson Heights."
From Roll Laura, we have, I believe a deeper understanding of RCV's complexities and potential effects on voter engagement is crucial. From Carl Tobin, we have, nothing about closed primaries was explained to me prior to attempting to vote, and being turned away, we should all be able to vote.
Next comment is from Reddit, username Ryan Trouble. about educational materials. There was a lot of info on the major citywide elections, mayor and comptroller, but little on borough president, and almost nothing on the city council. I found conflicting websites of who was even running and blank candidate pages, and even less on the judicial, which wasn't even mentioned in the packet sent in the mail. Like I said earlier, we don't include those in our voter guide, unfortunately, but we do mention the positions that are being run, that our people are actually running in, and that can all be found on our online voter guide as well, especially for the city council candidates. And then Reddit username, books, coffee, dogs. Three of my favorite things. I wasn't able to vote for my council assembly representative at all. The candidate is from my area, and I and three others, only three of us were in the library at the time, were confused because the other election district had the council assembly representative options. We were told by the election board workers that our districts were redrawn, and we had no idea. Yes, that there was redistricting, and the maps were changed, and some people do vote at poll sites where some folks are voting for one person and some voting for another. It's a good idea to check your poll site before you head to the polls.
And another Reddit username, AAXT, wrote, the machines were too sensitive, and everyone was told to only bubble in their bubbles only halfway, or else the machine might reject the vote. And another Reddit username Blue387, wrote, my polling site was up a staircase and down another staircase. This is not wheelchair accessible. I am able to walk up and down steps, but I am concerned for those who cannot. The voting site was also warm in June as it lacked air conditioning. And that testimony echoes some testimony we've heard earlier this evening from some of our participants here about air conditioning and the conditions for summer polling places. So really appreciate the written feedback that we received. We had one item submitted this evening in the Q&A box that I want to throw out to our panel. Can the panel address the design layout of the paper ballot? It appeared disorganized, confusing, and the ranked choice layout was frustrating. And I will, before opening up to any of my colleagues, I will reiterate that unfortunately we don't have any direct control over ballot design. That's done by the Board of Elections, and we will most certainly communicate these concerns to our colleagues at the BOE. Anyone else have anything to add in response to this Q&A box and comment or question? All right. Well, I want to put out one last call for any additional testimony from attendees here in the meeting. If you'd like to speak, last call, please raise your hand and we'll promote you to a panelist and invite you to give testimony. Going once, going twice.
Oh, Paul, sorry, I just wanted to chime in as well. I know several folks had indicated lack of interpretation services or lack of information in their language. I want to highlight that the Civic Engagement Commission has a very robust voter interpretation, and happy to send the link to that information after the hearing as well.
Thanks so much, Olivia. And Nachesa, who provided testimony earlier this evening, we've had some more to share. Nachesa, we welcome you back into the conversation. Maybe she had left, I'm not sure. All right. Well, if there's no more speakers tonight, I want to thank again all those who gave testimony this evening and submitted written testimony leading up to the hearing. This is always a great opportunity to hear from the public on their experiences. And thank you again to our colleagues at the Board of Elections and poll workers for their hard work in this election. Any additional questions or written testimony should be emailed to NYC Votes at nyccfb.info. And with that, I want to once again thank you all, especially my colleagues Olivia and Tim, and our VAC members, Chris and Danielle. And I want to wish you all a wonderful evening. We'll see you at the next VAC meeting in August. Good night.